Hello, I'm Laura.
And I'm Kat.
And welcome to the Giving Voice podcast from Chandler House at UCL, where each month we invite special guests to help us explore an area of speech and language therapy you've always wanted to know a little bit more about.
Plus, each episode we will share our peaks and troughs of being a student speech and language therapist, and we get to stick our noses into the lives of our fellow students at UCL.
This month, the Giving Voice Society have been promoting AAC Awareness Month.
That is Alternative and Augmentative Communication.
And in its honour, we are going to be talking all things alternative and augmentative when it comes to communication.
AAC can be anything from simple gesture to the more high-tech eye gaze technology, and we hope to give you some interesting perspectives on what this actually means for people in real life.
During the programme, we will be speaking to Julia, a Year A speech and language therapy student.
Richard Cave, an SLT who specialises in voice banking for patients with motor neurone disease.
And also a bit of added chat about us.
But before that, let's hear a bit more about what AAC means for the people who use it and work with it every day.
Hi, my name is Ersin Sanay, a highly specialist speech and language therapist working with complex needs. For me, as a speech and language therapist, AAC is a very exciting field. It allows me to do my job properly and effectively by promoting the right of communication for all. It allows people with a range of diagnoses to be able to communicate with a range of communication partners in a whole variety of ways and means. It includes the most primary communication methods such as signing, gestures and touch, and goes all the way up to more highly technological methods such as eye gaze.
My name's Richard Cave and I'm a speech and language therapist. AAC to me is anything that can support or help people with their communication. It could be pen and paper, it could be facial expression, gesture, all the way up to high tech. In my view, high tech should always be accompanied by low tech.
My hopes for the future for AAC is for it to be a less mysterious field. I would also like the AAC users to be involved in all the decision making, design and production of the devices and or the updates of the devices to ensure what the final product is exactly what is necessary.
For me, the future of AAC is it will be seamless. We won't even see it, we won't even think about it, it will just be there. And it will be there in everything that everybody uses. So there's a very balanced, equal playing field for communication because everybody has everything and people with communication difficulties will be catered for by mainstream devices.
The myth about AAC that continues to exist among some family members is that it will impact on speech production. However, a lot of the AAC users use what we call a total communication approach, which is a combination of all methods available to them.
I'd like to bust that AAC is, full of complexity, and there's no quick fix for AAC. AAC is really not about equipment; it's about people. So you have to understand who it is you're helping with AAC in order to get a nice AAC solution. It's really not about equipment.
So that was a small introduction to AAC from Richard Cave, who we're going to be hearing a little bit more from later, and Ersin, who was one of the speakers at our Giving Voice AAC event that was a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, that was a really great event, and I would definitely recommend coming to the Giving Voice talks because they're always really interesting and they get really good guests, and SLTs as well as the people that are affected by the difficulties or the interventions that we're talking about. So definitely come along next time if you haven't already.
Great PR plug there for Giving Voice. Okay, and so now I think we'll move on to our first interview. Ooh. Thank you. Which was, so I met Julia, who's one of our Year A students.
Great, let's listen to it now.
With me right now, I've got Julia, who is one of our lovely Year A's from the Speech and Language Therapy Masters course. Hello, Julia.
Hi.
And she's kindly agreed to share some of her experiences about the first kind of month and the build-up to doing the course. So yeah, I'm going to say first, apologies to Julia and our audience, I have not been a very good student speech and language therapist and haven't looked after my voice very well this weekend. I had too much fun at a wedding and now I'm a little bit husky, so sorry about that.
It shows you had a good time.
Exactly. Anyway, so Julia, welcome.
Thank you.
Now, could you just give me a little bit of background about why you wanted to be a speech and language therapist?
Okay, so I didn't always know that I wanted to do this. When I was at school, I was really into science and that was my thing. I did really science-focused A-levels and I went off and did an undergrad in biochemistry.
Oh, very different.
Yeah, very different. And then very quickly realised that wasn't really for me. I didn't want to be stuck in a lab every day and not talking to anyone. So I then started looking at different healthcare options. I was kind of torn between education and healthcare for a while.
And why was that? Why healthcare? Why did that attract you?
I think because I really like working with people directly. I did a lot of volunteering throughout my undergrad and before that at school as well. It all starts off with Duke of Edinburgh, doesn't it? That's how you get into it.
Always.
So I started looking at different allied health professions because I didn't want to be a doctor either because I wanted to work directly one-to-one with people. I looked into physio, but I wasn't really that into sports side of things. And then there was OT. I found speech and language therapy and it was just perfect for me. I just think you get to help people talk and communicate for a career. It's just amazing.
Amazing. Yeah. And so did you do any kind of work that was related to speech and language therapy before the course?
Yes. So between my undergrad and starting this course, I worked in a mainstream primary school. It was a junior school, so it's years 3 to 6, which is age 7 to 11. And that was great. I worked as a learning support assistant there, which is a bit like a TA, but you tend to work more closely with specific kids in the class. And I worked really closely with this one girl who has autism spectrum disorder, ASD. And we just had such a bond. And she has the same name as me as well. And it was just lovely. And I got to know her so well over the years. And she taught me so much. And yeah, it was just great helping her to access the curriculum. And by the end of the year, she'd made so much progress. Like when I first came into the class, she just ignored me for maybe 3 weeks. And I was constantly trying to engage with her and she just wasn't bothered. And then by the end, she would come up to me and initiate a conversation in the playground. And it's just amazing. Yeah.
Wow, amazing. And is that kind of the client group that you want to work with when you graduate?
That's a good question. I don't really know. I'm trying to keep my options open at the moment because if I decide now that I really want to work with kids, then my second year when I work with adults is not going to be as fun. But a lot of my volunteering experience was with adults. So before I worked in the school, I thought it would be adults for sure. So I did some volunteering at Headway, which is a charity that works with people who've had a brain injury. And I used to volunteer in an old people's home for 4 or 5 years when I was at school. And I really enjoyed that as well, learning about people with dementia and just getting to know them. So that was really nice.
Great. Okay, so let's take it back to kind of just before you were starting the course. So you'd kind of, how did you find the interview? That's the first question.
It was pretty scary. It was the second one I'd had. So I'd already had one at Reading and that was very different. It was...
Oh, interesting. How was it different?
It was a bit more disorganised, I would say. It kind of made you feel comfortable. My UCL interview was very different. It was much more structured. And yeah, it was quite scary.
I remember being pretty scared.
Yeah, I just felt like I didn't know anything. And we were very quickly shown a video of a client and we had to dissect the video and analyse all of his communication strengths and difficulties and comment on the way the therapist in the video was interacting with him and what she was doing well and what she could improve on almost. And I had no idea what I was doing. So it was all kind of, it was exciting because it was nice to kind of be asked to do something so involved in your interview. But yeah, it was scary.
I mean, interviews are always scary, aren't they? Regardless
definitely.
of what you're doing. But yeah, I remember leaving and just feeling like, I can't remember how long it was. It must have been like 3-4 hours.
Yeah, it was quite long.
And I just remember walking down these steps that are like so familiar now at the back of at the front of Chandler House, and just being like, I can't really remember anything that just happened.
Yeah, it's really weird meeting all the other prospective students as well, because you want to make friends, but it also feels a bit weird and like forced, because you feel like you're all competing for the same place.
So how long have you've had, what, about 2 months now? Of course.
Started at the end of August, so a month and a bit.
Yeah, and how is it? How's the first kind of month been?
Yeah, it's been really great, actually. I think I was just amazed at how much I was enjoying it when I first got here. It has like leveled out now. I feel a bit less manic about it.
Can you give me a few markers? Because obviously, as a year B, I've been through it last year, so I want to know exactly where you are. Have you done any assignments yet?
We haven't done anything assessed yet, but we have our first deadline next week. So,
which is
our early years placement assignment. So over the course of the past 4 weeks, we've been going into a nursery or reception once a week, and just kind of getting to know how to interact with young kids and seeing how the staff there, how they run the show, because it's different in every place. And they're just lovely. They just want to play all the time. It's so great. And also we have our first exam next week.
Oh, is this the anatomy exam?
Yeah.
How are you feeling about that?
I'm not ready, but I will be. I
remember everyone in our year was so worried about this exam.
Yeah, it's a lot of content that we have to cover.
But Jane's slides are very good. Everything you need to know on there.
Yes.
So it's okay.
And thank goodness for that, because I don't have time to make any notes.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's a brilliant teacher, and it does kind of make it a little bit less scary.
So personally, when I started phonetics, I think most people probably say this unless they've got like a linguistics degree.
Yeah.
But phonetics was the thing that I was like, what the heck is going on?
Me too. That's the thing that I've just come from now, actually, a phonetics lecture. And it just, there's so much information, and it's like learning another language.
Yep.
Being able to write down all the sounds that a human can make is quite a big feat.
You just need to listen to it over and over and over again, and it does. You never think it's going to get in there, but it does. Can you give me, this is quite a hard one, but can you give me a peak and a trough of your month so far?
A peak would probably be the very first talk we had from Stephen Block, who is our course director this year. Because I remember him saying, and I haven't let this go, that it doesn't matter how well you do in terms of your grades, as long as you pass everything, then you're a fully qualified speech and language therapist, and getting 90% in everything doesn't make you a better therapist. I thought that was really nice. It's a nice way to kind of set the tone and just make us all chill out a little bit.
Yeah, I think that's a really good piece of advice, because I think with a course which is so varied, I mean, you've got phonetics, you've got linguistics, statistics, anatomy, so many things. I found you had to really pick your battles. That one, that's not my strongest. It's never going to be my strongest. I just want to pass it.
And you can't be good at everything.
No, that's a lovely peak. Okay, and now a trough, please.
I think, unfortunately, it has to be phonetics. It's very, very hard. And I think we will all get there.
Definitely a tip. I got one of those, some flashcards, but on like a ring binder thing.
Okay.
And I just had the symbol and then the voice, place, manner on the other side. So I use them all the time.
That is good advice.
So kind of away from the course a bit, what do you do outside of the course?
What do I do with my life?
Because, I found when I started doing this course, I kind of slowly let everything else go.
Yeah.
And me and Kat really want to make it, keep doing those things. This year I'm determined. So we had a little chat before, and I think you're someone that has quite a few different things going on. So can you just give us a bit of a
kind of like you, I'm scared of losing all those extra things, and I think it's very important to do something far away from the course if you can, just to kind of give yourself a bit of reality. And it's hard because I live quite far away, so joining societies is difficult time-wise. But yeah, so we're in the second week of give it a go week at the moment. So I've been trying to cram in.
Can you just give me what does that mean? Give it a
So
go week.
the UCL Union run lots of free taster sessions for all of their societies in the first 2 weeks of term. Well, it's the first 2 weeks of the undergrad term. So all of us master's students have had a bit of time to acclimatise beforehand, which is quite nice. And so I've been trying to ram in as many taster sessions as I can around my pretty busy timetable already.
That is impressive. Which ones are you doing?
So I went to a BSL sign language taster session, which was really cool.
Oh, amazing.
I really enjoyed that.
And that's quite related as well. So
yes,
it's
it's
kind of
not too
crossing
far
over.
away. It might actually be too close. I do want to do something entirely different. So I've been trying to find time for different dance societies, and I've also blocked in post-grad knitting on Thursday. But I mean, that's going to be the first thing to go because I've got to revise for this exam.
Maybe you can do it at the same time.
Maybe
I think you
it'll calm
actually
me down.
you have to get into a bit of a flow with knitting before you can do that. It's a shame because Kat is actually an expert knitter.
Really?
So, she could have shown you
Amazing.
some stuff.
Don't even have to go to the taster session then. It's
Kat will have
brilliant.
to set up her own Chandler House Knitting Society.
I don't want to have to go anywhere. That'd be great.
I think a lot of lunchtimes last year, we'd be quite stressed, and I'd look over and Kat would just be pulling out like a scarf from her bag and taking it out on the needles.
That is amazing. Amazing. She could teach me some things then. I'm actually going straight after this to another taster session.
Oh, really? Which one?
It's pole fitness taster session.
Oh,
yeah.
Many years ago.
Many moons.
Tried that out and it was so hard.
Yeah, it's really hard.
Really tough to do.
Yeah, it requires a lot from you, I think.
A lot of strength.
A lot of strength, a lot of energy, and a lot of willingness to get a bit of a bruise. There's a lot of friction burns you can get from pole dancing. Yeah, it's a bit scary. But yeah, it's pretty cool and it's something a bit different.
If there was one piece of advice that you could ask from Year B, as you have one sitting here, what would it be?
So I think I would ask you, what is the most efficient way to use my downtime on placement?
Okay. Definitely 100% fill out your evidence log.
Okay.
I hate to admit this, but both times I did my placement, I seemed to leave it. I had really good intentions for the first week, and then at ongoing placement, which is many weeks, I just completely stopped doing it. And then at the end, you're like, oh God, no! Just trying to remember all these little things that you've done. Just do it constantly. At the end of each day that you do your placement, just try and do some of your evidence log, because it's so annoying.
Yeah.
When you get to the end and you're some of them are evidence of a time that you've shown rapport building skills. And I think in my first one I wrote something brought some chocolate digestives for the team and made tea.
What more do they want for that, though?
I don't know. I mean, it seemed to be accepted, so it's fine.
I'll remember that one.
But yeah, definitely do the evidence log.
That's very good advice.
Okay, well, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, well, yes, that was the end of our chat now. You are free to go.
Hooray!
But yeah, thank you so much, Gina. That was
Yay,
great.
thank you.
That was so lovely to hear from Julia and take a little bit of a throwback to our Year A listening to that. She did a fantastic job, so thanks so much for coming to chat to us, Julia. It was really interesting to hear what you had to say, and your path into speech and language therapy was particularly interesting to me. And also, if you do want to start doing knitting in Chandler House, I am well up for it. So,
Did that bring back any memories from the first month of Year A for you, Kat?
Definitely. I think the Trough being phonetics, unfortunately, is a bit of a theme for me, and the advice that you gave actually was spot on, because filling in that evidence log was, it was a habit that I'm glad I picked up.
Oh God, we're starting our Year B ongoing placements, so that's 1 day a week for, is it 5 months?
Until March, so it's a long time.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's about 5 months, yeah.
So I'm really going to try and heed my own advice this time.
Absolutely, I'll be checking up on you every week.
Please do. I'll just listen back to this and remember that I did invite that one myself. Okay, so I think we should probably introduce the next part of the programme now.
Yes, absolutely. We just had an absolutely fascinating chat with Richard Cave, who is an SLT who specialises in voice banking for patients with motor neurone disease. But Richard is also working on this project called Euphonia, which is really exciting to hear about. So I think you're all in for a treat. Listen in. I've got Richard Cave with me here, who's going to talk to me a little bit about his work. He's a speech and language therapist who works with the MND Association for the Voice Banking at Diagnosis project and other projects, including Euphonia, which I believe he's going to tell us a little bit more about in a bit. So, hi, Richard. Thanks so much for coming in.
Thank you for asking me. I'm actually very excited about this whole idea about a podcast. So,
yeah, we're very excited about it and very excited to have you. So thanks so much for coming.
You're welcome.
So our first question for you is just to ask you to give us a little bit of a description about what voice banking is and who might use it.
Okay, so it is a way of where people record a certain number of phrases, any number from 350 standard phrases up to 3,500. And the outcome of those phrases is a synthetic approximation of someone's voice. So in theory, once all those phrases have been meshed together, that in theory you could use a communication device and in it type or eye gaze or whatever, any word or non-word you like, whether it's been recorded or not in the voice bank, and it should say it in a synthetic approximation of your voice. Now I'm saying that, a synthetic approximation of your own voice, because as a speech therapist, we need to make it clear that voice banking is not your voice. It's not. It can never be your voice. It's not your voice, and yet when you look on the internet, there are lots of providers that do this voice banking stuff. They often say, we're going to preserve your voice, and actually that's just not true. In fact, it's more than not true. It's a kind of a lie. And it's, people, if you talk to people who are at risk of losing their voice and they want to bank their voice, they often talk in terms of identity and actually how they want to preserve their voice. They want to preserve something about them which is kind of truly them for the future. So as speech therapists, we have to be quite clear that actually, kind of a voice bank will give you a synthetic approximation. But if I said using my own voice bank, I'm okay, I could type it out 10 times and it would say I'm okay in exactly the same way. But actually, quite often I'll say I'm okay, and I'll mean lots of different ways, and I'll say it in different ways with a lot of pause and prosody and emphasis and stress. And voice banking is just not there yet. But what it does have is a kind of a really nice. It captures accent beautifully. It captures the kind of the tone. It captures the tone really nicely. But the rest of it, it's still robotic, and it's still a synthetic voice. And so, my work at the MND Association with voice banking is to let people who need to make, the right people make a decision about voice banking. So I will let a person with MND know everything about voice banking, the good, the bad and the ugly, and let them make their own call on it. Because, it doesn't take that long these days, but it takes time and effort, and so it should be their decision whether they want to go for it or not.
Yeah, completely. And do you find when you speak to people that most people do opt for voice banking when you've given them the good, the bad, and the ugly, as you say, or is it more of a split?
I'd say most do, and some don't. And actually, I'm really happy when people don't, based on the information, because they've made their own call on it. The other piece about voice banking is, it's a synthetic approximation, but where does it go? And, this conversation is about AAC, and actually a voice bank is nothing more than a voice that is part of AAC. So when I talk about voice banking, I'm really talking about AAC and all the kind of problems and all the strengths and all the training, all the reliability, all the content, all the design that goes into AAC matters, because actually a voice bank is really a feature of AAC.
Okay, thank you. We were also wondering about what a speech and language therapist's role in voice banking is, if there is one.
You know what? This is a really good point. So, I mean, there's the official and there's the actual. So, what actually happens is when people have a question about their voice and losing their voice and their voice changing and dysarthria, they will be looking. They look to speech therapists. If they have a speech therapist, they'll be asking speech therapists, my voice is changing, what can I do? So almost by default, whether it's our role or not, we are, as speech therapists, being asked about voice banking. In 2018, towards the end of 2018, Royal College kind of did provide a statement to say that it is the role of speech language therapists to provide advice about voice banking. And I was very pleased, because actually that's happening anyway. And the big problem, that we have with voice banking, certainly until recently, is actually lots of people have been asking us about voice banking, but it's been hard for us as a profession because we haven't had the training, didn't really know about it. And, what happens if somebody comes up to me and says, I want to back my voice now? What happens next?
Yeah.
And it's quite scary because, I've heard, sometimes what happens next is, well, nothing happens next.
Right.
And that's not where we want to be, particularly in the case of motor neurone disease, which is a progressive disease. And, we don't know how long that voice is going to last. And some people, they're kind of blessed and their voice lasts a long time. Other times with kind of bulbous symptoms, voice can change very rapidly. So if somebody decides to bank their voice, then, the safest thing to do is to go and bank their voice. And that's that.
Right. Okay. That's really interesting. Thank you for that opinion on that, because it's not very clear to me. But I think speech language therapists, in my experience, tend to err on the side of taking on responsibilities that might possibly be a little bit beyond their role at times, because I think our role is very holistic. But because voice banking is so technical and different, and most speech therapists are sort of unfamiliar with it.
I think your last point is the most important, that it's like people are unfamiliar, and therefore, when it comes to doing stuff in our 45-minute session on stuff we know, we're confident with, that can make a difference, versus other stuff that may make a difference but we're unfamiliar about and actually a bit challenging on the technical side, then I know which way I'd go, and that's just the default. But my opinion is that, speech language therapists, we are moving into a very technical role, and so we should, because actually there is technology out there which we need to influence for the benefit of our patients, so that those technological changes take into account not just the mainstream, but everybody, all the people, whether they can talk or not, whether there are other COGCOM issues. Everything's changing. So our role is to advocate, for the tech, for big tech, little tech, all that kind of stuff, to make it work for everyone.
Definitely, I could not agree more. And that segues beautifully into talking a little bit about Euphonia, which is another project that you're involved in. Could you tell us a little bit more about what that is and what you do with Euphonia?
So this is new. This is new. We're kind of right at the front end of this project. So in the summer, Google formally announced that they were going to enable their Google Assistant, like Alexa and all the others, Cortana, Siri. They are going to enable Google Assistant to understand people with severe dysarthria. The kind of level of dysarthria I'm talking about, they're talking about, is somebody's understandable perhaps to their significant others, but not really to anybody else. So that's the level. And this is very big news. This is very big news, because actually, kind of, what does this mean? Well, assuming it works, which we don't know yet, but assuming it works, then the idea is that your phone or a device can translate for you in real time what's being said. So rather than somebody having to use other forms of AAC, which by default is more indirect, because they may have to write something, type something, do something else, potentially we can communicate still looking at each other and still communicating at the speed of natural communication, with this Google Assistant thing translating for us in real time. Of course, it's like, great, but there are about 1,000 questions that follow that sentence. And one that pops up is, say, well, where's this thing going to be? Is it going to be right in front of me? Is it going to be to the side? And also, how can people who have, this, particularly with MND, where we, there are so many things, so much decline going on. How would people with MND be able to access this technology? Not only to do whatever is needed to kind of record their voice so that Euphonia can recognise their particular type of dysarthria, but how can they use it afterwards? Given the access needs and strengths and all the other stuff, and the cognition perhaps. So all those are questions, and the nice thing about kind of working on this project is it's right at the very front. So what that means is, the people with MND, with our support, can directly influence this project right at the front.
That's fantastic.
It's exciting.
It's very exciting.
It'd be exciting when it works, but but that's technology.
That's fantastic.
And the other thing, we'll go back to voice banking just for a second, but that's changing as well. So, I remember I was giving a course a year ago at UCLH, and we were talking about 1,600 phrases and let's get the job done, big technical project.
Right.
And last year, if I say that, worked out the average for all the people I helped voice bank and others, the average to complete a voice bank was 3 months.
Wow.
And that's not just because 1,600 phrases minimum, but because things change, and the longer things change, more things are going to happen, and the harder it'll get.
Yes.
Fast forward to now, using different technology, and thanks to speech therapists get involved with how this thing is designed, we're down to 6 days, and actually most of the time we're getting it done in one session. So we're looking at a couple of hours.
That's phenomenal.
And that's because we're using, not only do we have a say, we've said to the suppliers, for God's sake, it's just not working. And here's the data. So not only we can have an influence there, but we can use the technology. So, no longer do we as speech therapists need to actually visit somebody to actually help them voice bank. Because if they have a laptop, say Windows 10 laptop, we log in remotely and we speak to them on the phone and say, this is how it works. Not only do I tell you how it works, I show you how it works. There's all that kind of stuff. And moving on, because technology is changing, because we are in the conversation now about the technology, moving on, it's very likely that in the next 6 months, that rather than 350 phrases, we are looking at 50 phrases.
Right.
For the same thing.
Wow.
So when it comes to 50 phrases for the same thing, now we need to really talk about, why can't we just voice bank everyone? Why can't we?
Yeah.
And the idea is whether they want to, if it's their decision to do it.
Yes.
But 50 phrases, I don't know how long that'll take. Half an hour. Half an hour with a break. And that's well within a speech therapy session.
Yeah.
And that could be just one thing, it's done. And the other great thing is, you talk about banking someone's voice. Now's the opportunity to talk about AAC. Now let's talk about all this equipment, all the communication stuff, because there's a lot to talk about there. And people, in my view, it'd be nice to talk about it sooner rather than later. Just have proper discussion about it. So, yeah.
Wow. So it sounds like from what you're saying, this kind of has the potential to be a bit of a gateway for speech and language therapy into technology sort of more widely as well, I suppose, because now that conversation's being had.
Yes.
And speech and language therapists are considering technology a bit more perhaps, and are engaging with the fact that technology is improving faster and faster and has so much potential.
Yes, I agree 100%. I think speech therapists, we have a fantastic opportunity here, because as technology changes, we can make it work for our client group. We have the skills. Google, however great they are, and they are great.
Yes.
They are great, but they're not speech therapists.
No.
We know stuff they don't.
Yeah.
And we know our client groups, and we can link these worlds together and actually make a really wonderful outcome.
That's so wicked. It's fascinating. It's so interesting to hear about. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. And you're on Twitter?
I'm on Twitter. I'm called Speed of Trust 27.
Lovely. Great.
Speed of Trust 27.
Fabulous. Thanks so much.
Okay.
Thank you.
Wow. That was so interesting.
I know. It's kind of mind-blowing, isn't it?
Yeah. It's amazing to think that, there's such a frontier of technology awaiting us now, and how much speech and language therapy can fit in with AI.
Totally. I can't say that I've ever thought of technology and speech and language therapy intersecting all that much, but he's kind of opened a whole new world into AI and how we may be using it in the future. And I think, we're right at the beginning of our careers, so it'll be absolutely astounding to see where it goes within our own careers, I'm sure.
Now let's kind of move away from speech and language therapy a little bit, although I know we love to talk about it.
Oh yes, we love to talk about it. This was a segment that I was very keen on having, because I think speech and language therapy obviously is the apple of our eye, our collective eye, and we all love it very, very much. But we do a lot of it, especially while we're at uni, and it's all a lot of new information, a bit of a barrage of all things speech and language therapy. So it's nice to talk a little bit about other things that we've got going on in our life. So this will also, it was also great for us because it'll mean that we actually go out and do things, that we have things to talk about on the podcast.
Yes, that would be the only reason we're doing it.
Oh yes.
So Kat, what have you been doing this week? Have you been doing anything exciting? Any theatre shows?
No
Music?
theatre shows. I did go to see the William Blake exhibition at the Tate.
Oh, I've heard about my
weekend.
housemate is dying to go to that.
Yeah, it was. I took a friend who'd never heard of William Blake, and the first room is his very, very early art, and it's all black and white, pencil, that sort of thing. And I was like, oh no, I've brought him to something that he's going to hate, because for me, Blake's very much about those wild colours and that wild imagination and visionary minds that he had, and it took a little while to get into that, but once we got in, it was really, really great. And he's such a fascinating character that it was really, really good to learn some more about him and delve right into that art and poetry.
Where is it on?
At the Tate Britain.
Oh yes,
in Pimlico.
Very
I believe
nice.
is where it is. Yeah. How about you, Laura? What have you been up to this week?
Oh my gosh. Do you know what? Just as we were saying that, I don't think I've done anything extracurricular this week.
Laura.
Oh my gosh. Oh, I tell you what, I've been reading a really good book.
Go on.
Called Milkman by Anna Burns. And that has been very good.
Great.
It's all about the trouble in Northern Ireland.
Interesting.
The troubles. Okay, well, I think that's some good recommendations for all of our listeners to be getting on with.
Yeah. Some extracurricular for you there, guys.
We are kind of doing this podcast for the Giving Voice Society. And if you enjoyed this podcast, please remember to check out the link under this podcast on the webpage, which will take you to the UCL Giving Voice Society website.
Yeah, and for those of you that don't know, the Giving Voice Society holds events to raise awareness about speech and language therapy and the difference that it makes to individuals with communication or swallowing difficulties and their families.
So yes, please support us. It's only £5. But yeah, thank you so much for listening. And make sure you tune in next month.
Bye.
Bye-bye.